Hey everyone, this is Precog from the Headphone Show, and today I have an overview of the Samsung Galaxy Buds. Believe it or not, but the Samsung Galaxy Buds are some of the most well-rounded and bang-for-your-buck items in their price bracket. In fact, they're so good that they trade blows with a lot of their best wired counterparts, and with all the convenience of a truly wireless IM to top it off. But in retrospect, perhaps this shouldn't have been surprising. Samsung actually owns Harman International, which developed the Harman Target Curve, an aggregate preference curve for sound. So in this little overview of sorts, I'm going to be answering the question that a lot of other reviewers sort of glaze over or just leave out entirely, and that's how do all the Galaxy Buds actually sound? By the end of this, hopefully you'll have enough information to decide which one is for you. Let's take a look. Okay, as usual, I'm just going to keep the tangibles short and sweet. In terms of fit and comfort, my preferences lie with the design of the original Buds and the Buds Plus. This notch here makes for a very secure fit, and the way the Buds contour to the concha of the ear is just very comfortable. If I was sleeping with Buds, not recommended by the way, or working out, I would gravitate towards the Buds Plus or the original Buds. The more bulbous design of the Buds Pro make them a tad uncomfortable, and they also seem to disengage easier with sudden movements. That's definitely a bit ironic because in terms of feature set, they are the most rich, and they're also IPX7 water resistance, which is something that you generally want if you're going to be working out with Buds. They also have ANC, active noise cancelling, but I don't really consider that to be much of an advantage as it's pretty poor even by truly wireless standards. In terms of battery life, I would go for the Buds Plus. They have, I believe, 9 hours, which is pretty much class leading for a truly wireless Bud. So yeah, definitely go for this if you are just after battery life. They will last you for days on end. If you're looking for the best value, then I would go for the OG Buds. You can regularly find these for around $50 on the secondary market, which is a terrific value in my opinion. Alright, here is a comparison of the three Galaxy Buds on a frequency response graph. Basically, this depicts relative loudness at each part of the audible frequency range. In this case, at least for humans, that's from about 20 Hz to 20 kHz. Now for some caveats. These measurements were taken off of an IEC 711 coupler and there was a resonance peak at around 8 kHz. The coupler itself is only certified up until around 10 kHz, and because of this resonance peak, measurements after this point should not be considered entirely accurate. And finally, at the end of the day, while a measurement is a terrific reference point, you should use your ears to make a final judgment call. Okay, so at least for now, I'm going to keep the comparison between the OG Buds and the Buds Plus, just because they're tuned very similarly. Both of them follow the Harman target, and in fact, the Buds Plus hits the Harman target almost exactly. So both of them are fairly sub-bass oriented IMs. And what I mean by this is that they have a tendency to prioritize rumble over punch, which generally corresponds to more of a mid-bass emphasis. The Buds Plus, however, has a little bit more energy in that sub 200 Hz region, which is going to lend it to more rumble. And if all you're looking for is good bass, then the Buds Plus actually has one of the best bass tunings of pretty much any truly wireless IM on the market. Where we start seeing some deviations is in the mid-range and treble. And unfortunately, the Buds Plus is a prime example of some of the issues that befall Harman targeted IMs. The lower mid-range of the Buds Plus is fairly lean, and when you contrast that to a more emphasized upper mid-range at around 3 to 4 kHz, that has a tendency to prioritize clarity and forwardness at the expense of shoutiness, and a little bit too much brightness. This also isn't helped by the Buds Plus treble. It is more emphasized than the OG Buds, and this lends to some timbre issues, which I'll delve into later. Again, the OG Buds are tuned very similarly, but they don't emphasize these areas to the degree of which the Buds Plus does. So if you're asking me, the OG Buds are actually the better tuned IMs, despite the Buds Plus hitting the target more closely. Okay, so I saved the Buds Pro for last because they're basically the least Harman of these IMs. They're a whole lot more V-shaped and warm in general. Bass doesn't curve out until around 600 Hz, meaning you're going to get a lot more of that mid-bass I talked about earlier. The bass on the Buds Pro is a lot more boomy in general. The trade-off here, of course, is that it's not going to be as controlled. But by truly wireless IM standards, I think this is perfectly fine. I've heard much, much worse. The mid-range of the Buds Pro also has a fairly emphasized upper mid-range at around 3 to 4 kHz, but the difference here is because you have more presence down low in that lower mid-range, it kind of balances it out, and it serves to sort of offset the edginess that characterizes the OG Buds and the Buds Plus in the mid-range. Treble on the Buds Pro is also fairly emphasized. But here's the thing, it is very, very smooth going through the lower treble in the crash regions. And to top it off, the Buds Pro also has the best treble extension out of all three of these IMs. So you're gonna get a little bit more air, a little bit more zing in those upper harmonics. I think this is also a good segue back into the Harman target. The Harman target, you have to remember that it's an aggregate preference curve. It does not reflect the ideal sound for a lot of listeners, and in a lot of respects, I would argue that the Buds Pro actually addresses a lot of these deficiencies for the better. If you're asking me, between the three of these IMs, the Buds Pro is actually the most well-tuned. Okay, let's talk about technical performance. Technical performance is a reference to characteristics of sound outside of measurable frequency response. That, or we just don't know how to interpret from existing measurements these traits yet. This is where stuff like speed, dynamics, and detour retrieval generally crop up. So in general, I would probably rank the various Galaxy Buds at around the same level of technical proficiency. They're pretty much at the top of the truly wireless game, but they're also not going to match, not by a long shot, a lot of their wired counterparts, especially as you go up the ladder. That being said, there are definitely little trade-offs here and there. When it comes to imaging in particular, the Buds Pro are not very good. And when I talk about imaging, there are a lot of interpretations of this word, but for me, at least most closely, it is a reference to an IM's ability to sort of shape the room, this sort of soundstage around the listener. For example, when you have two speakers set up side by side, left to right, there should be the strong illusion of a third speaker in the center, which is generally referred to as the center image. When it comes to center image distinction, the Buds Pro just doesn't really have any of it. So it's stuff that would generally token the center image, like vocals and drums in the back, they really sound like they're coming from inside your brain. I think that's the best way of explaining it. The Buds Plus and the OG Buds, they're not much better, but at least they don't give me this impression as closely. On the other hand, for timbre, the Buds Pro are the most pleasant to listen to. The decay is just very natural on them, and that warmth is very pleasing to hear. By contrast, the Buds Plus has a certain stridentness or tinniness to the way notes decay. I don't know whether it is a product of the treble or that very emphasized 3 kHz region or just the driver itself, but it is most definitely there and it stands out like a sore thumb every time I A/B between these IMs. Layering, the sense of space or distinction between instruments is also where the G-Buds Pro sort of takes the short end of the stick. Personally, I'm inclined to say that this is actually most attributable to its frequency response. When you have a more emphasized bass region and more quantity in the lower mid-range, it has a tendency to make notes feel more closed in and just sort of prevent the soundstage from expanding. What sort of corroborates this, at least for me, is that the Buds Pro actually has the best resolution, or clarity with which notes are articulated. By contrast, the OG Buds and the Buds Plus, they're a little bit more incisive in their bass shelves, a little bit leaner throughout the lower mid-range, and the effect of this is a more segmented but clean presentation. Okay, let's just do a little wrap-up where I'll rank my sonic preferences between the three of them. In number 1, I would put the Buds Pro, in number 2, I have the OG Buds, and number 3, the Buds Plus. More specifically for bass, the Buds Plus is still the one that you're going to want to buy, followed by the OG Buds and the Buds Pro in second place. They're pretty comparable in my opinion, at least. For mid-range, I would put the Buds Pro at number 1, the OG Buds at number 2, and the Buds Plus at number 3. And it's the same story for the treble. When it comes to technical performance, again, I think that they're all around the same level with some minor trade-offs here and there. Don't go for the Buds Pro if you want good imaging, it kind of sucks at it, and don't go for the Buds Plus if you want good timbre, it kind of sucks at that. So in a lot of respects, at least intangibly, I guess you could say that the OG Buds is still the most well-rounded out of the three of them. In general, if you already own one or the other of these IMs and you are thinking about quote-unquote upgrading, I would probably not. They're all very good IMs in their own right, and there's just not enough of a performance gain to sort of justify that upgrade. Of course, don't let me dissuade you otherwise if there is a certain feature, hardware-wise, that you're looking for. As always, I hope you guys found this video review informative, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.